Okay, let's get this party started. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our European attendees. And thanks for joining us for today's webinar presented by Ziflow. My name is Mike Peterbaugh. I'm going to be one of your hosts for today's webinar, our second in a two-part series on Agile Marketing. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Attendee lines are muted, and that's just to cut down on background noise. Which today for me would be my neighbors getting a new roof. So apologies in advance if that starts to become obvious on the audio. Our session today is being recorded, neighbors roof and all, and a copy will be sent out after we finish up today. We're also going to take questions at the end of today's presentation, but please feel free to enter them at any time during the course of the webinar. My co-host likes to take some on the fly sometimes, which makes me incredibly nervous. But if we see the questions pop up, we'll definitely try and take them as we see them. But otherwise, we'll be taking them at the end of today's call. Let's meet our hosts. As I mentioned, my name is Mike Peterbaugh. I'm the CMO here at Ziflow, and I'm joined by Will Liu, our VP of Ops, who leads both our operations teams as well as our customer success strategy, in addition to being one of our in-house Agile gurus.
Hey everyone, excited to show you a couple of tips on how to use Ziflow for Agile Marketing today.
Cool. All right. For those of you on the call who aren't familiar with Ziflow, as a company and product, we are focused on helping create brands worldwide solve their most pressing creative review and approval challenges. If this is something that you and your team are looking for more help on, you can find more information and how to contact us on our website at www.ziflow.com. All right. We'll talk a little bit more about Ziflow specifically throughout today's call. But before we jump into today's discussion, I wanted to level set very quickly for those of you who might be joining this webinar in the second act. Last month, and part one of this webinar, we talked about why Agile can be of extreme benefit to creative teams. And a little bit of the how by discussing specific methods on how to execute on that goal. If you haven't checked out that webinar, no worries. You can hang out with us here and check out the recording after, which can be found at the link on the screen here. I came up with a very clever short link for you. We're going to do a quick summary before we get into the thrust of today's discussion, showing you exactly what those integrations look like later in today's call. So today, we are going to talk about 5 example integrations that creative teams are using with Ziflow to drive an agile approach to the creative production process. In talking with our customers, and this is where Will spends probably the bulk of his time, and learning how they're implementing change in their organizations, one of the things that we noticed is that many of them are looking for the best of both worlds. Real-time action coupled with long-term benefits. And whether we plan for it or not, that's actually become an underlying theme of sorts for today's presentation. So let's do a quick recap of what we talked about at the beginning of last month's webinar, just to set some context, again, for those of you who are joining us new this month. And again, once you get your copy of today's presentation, please do go back and check out that link for last month's webinar for more details on the next few slides. Because I do basically truncate them quite a bit for this, the purposes of this month. So, as I said, like a quick recap. If you've been on our webinars before, you know that we typically like to start all of our webinars with the why. In this case, why would the creative process benefit from an agile approach? We commissioned a survey in 2019 where we looked at challenges that creative marketers are faced with. And very quickly, to cut to the chase, like I like to say, we saw 3 main themes kind of bubble up to the top: content, collaborators, and compliance, interestingly enough. And each of these factors start to paint the picture as to how Agile can drive for creative marketing teams. With regards to content, clearly the volume of creative content work is pushing teams to their limits as to what you can produce effectively. I'm sure many of you are probably struggling with that today. And this juggling doesn't really bode well for down and doing big campaign reveals or big reveals for output. And now these projects have more collaborators, and that's the people providing feedback, guidance, approvals than ever before. And the methods of providing that feedback really haven't improved to keep up with this trend. It's impacting timelines every day. This is a key area to shine a light on if you're considering an agile approach. for your creative team. And also, I think, the stakeholders, and it kind of blends into the last point. I think this is also a very big issue, especially with what their brand stands for these days. And this, kind of getting into the last bullet, this really rolls up into a crescendo around compliance. More content, more voices, and now more restrictions, or more introspection, I should say, as an additive there, which drives even greater need for process. It's an interesting balancing act that you have to really execute on to move and act quickly, but with the required approvals and guidance that is needed for an effective, compliance program. So for those 3 C's, content, collaborators, and compliance, when those come together, you can see it be a challenge. But now those challenges are amplified and accentuated in what we're dealing with as our new reality, which is a new reality of work from home and remote working. So when you take the team members that were typically within the office walls, and you kind of focus and look at the challenges that the 3 C's are bringing to the table, you can see now that this is probably a really good opportunity for teams to maybe accommodate, or thinking about how they want to accommodate an agile approach. So again, that was just a kind of a quick recap. We spent most of the time last month talking about the why, and kind of building up, obviously the story and the background for the need. Let's talk about how to drive the agility in today's creative production process. And we're going to be getting into the technologies that we see most often being used to try and leverage an agile approach in the creative production process. So the first component of Agile, this kind of follows the same format that we saw in the last month's webinar. So if you were on last month's webinar, this may look a little familiar to you. The first component of Agile that we discussed, and we want to discuss today here, is the idea of rapid iterations. And this takes a few disciplines into account. You and your team have to be super efficient at the ability to accommodate change, not just getting changes done, but to accommodate the requests for changes. New requests for projects are one example. The most common example being feedback. We've talked already a little bit about feedback loops, as well as the collaborators and stakeholders, which are all driving change to designs, or new information, which changes the direction of a project. So let's get into some Ziflow specific examples. And getting into the first example, that we want to, one way that we help support rapid is via native plugins. And in this case, on this screen, and I've blown up the screenshot quite a bit because there's kind of a lot of detail in this that you can consume. But in this case, we're looking at our Ziflow plugin for Adobe Premiere Pro, specifically around the need for video editors. Our Adobe plugins, one for After Effects, is an example of how you can integrate Ziflow into your existing workflow to quickly and efficiently accommodate change and requests. But it also has the added benefit of allowing you to retain the consistency of your review and approval process. So, I talked a little bit at the beginning of the presentation about this kind of two-pronged thing that customers are looking for. Whether or not they really verbalize it, what they're looking for is like real-time action, but with long-term benefit. And this is definitely a really good example. Having this capability cuts down the back and forth via email and email chains, and allows, in this instance, video creators specifically to push changes more efficiently. And this is both an enabler and a benefit, in the sense that it allows your team members, and this is especially true for creators, it allows them to work in the apps that they are most familiar and comfortable with. And that was a point we spent some time on in our last webinar, and it's a really important one. And I think this might be the first time in a webinar I've ever used the highlight in Google Slides, but it's a really important piece here. And I think we talked a little bit last month about when identifying high value integration options, it's all important to consider how you can keep your teammates in the app they are most comfortable with. Will, I know you've been working with some of our customers who've already started working with the Adobe plugins. Do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think a really interesting background is how the Adobe plugin came to be at Ziflow. The plugin actually came through um, a request from existing customers that were using Ziflow for video production. It's something that we released earlier this year, and I think it's actually a really great example of how we're seeing a change in the creative production process, and we're seeing video production adopt agile methodologies. So instead of waiting for feedback and collecting all the feedback and then actioning on that feedback, which is probably more aligned with a waterfall approach, we're really seeing that studios now are trying to view and incorporate the changes right away, and they're really embracing that agile methodology of rapid iteration. So for me, I think seeing customers adopt this is really seeing the shift in creative production processes and adopting more agile methodologies because, like I said, this actual feature, this enhancement was influenced by our existing customer base, where they were saying that they want to have faster way to take the feedback from their video reviews and incorporate that feedback so they can push the revisions even faster, and allowing them to work in the tools that they're already working with and seeing that feedback within those tools is really the top way to do that. So a couple really interesting things for me is one, the large customer demand for something like this, as well as seeing that shift from a more traditional waterfall production to rapid iterations through agile methodologies.
That's great. Yeah, thanks, Will. I mean, I think that's definitely, again, I don't think we could, reiterate that point enough, is that, if you're able to keep team members in apps that they're most comfortable with, you're going to see even more efficiencies in the long term than you would if, you were introducing, wholesale new apps. And something that we've paid attention to since we launched Ziflow originally was we knew that integration with other marketing tools, the MarTech stack, but also, tools like Adobe was going to be really important to our user base. So thanks, Will. I appreciate that info or that insight. There's another aspect of accommodating change that can be realized through a smart use of your cloud storage technologies. This is actually some of the original technology here at Ziflow, which we're very, very fond of here. Integrating Ziflow with cloud storage is literally hundreds of automation scenarios to accelerate file and folder processes. And this integration scenario is all about cutting down or really eliminating entirely. And that might sound like kind of a boastful statement, but it's possibly true. Really cutting down or eliminating the administrative overhead in the creative production process. And as you can see here, Ziflow integrates with both Google Drive and Dropbox. And there's a few other methods as well, such as intake forms, which we've talked about quite a bit here on our webinars, which allow you to kick off a wide range of automation scenarios. I think one popular is using a watched hot folder and initiating new proofs based on assets dropped into that watched folder. And these assets can also be paired with a workflow as well, which immediately ups the degree of efficiency by a factor of 10 right off the bat when you are dropping a file into a folder and it kicking off an automated workflow scenario based on just the source of the file. That's pretty powerful. So for those of you on the call from the agency world, if you've got a agency folder set up specifically for one client, and you've got a workflow that you always run your client's assets through, and it could be different types of assets too. A video project could get a different workflow than say a design file workflow. So that really does up the degree of efficiency almost immediately. Well, I know I'll get you jump back on the phone here. I know you spent a lot of time working with customers on how to prioritize their automation within Ziflow. From a process perspective, where do you see them getting the most benefit?
Yeah, I think where we see the most benefit on automation perspective is really the handoff from file production to proof creation. So automatically ingesting a file that was uploaded into Google Drive or Dropbox and creating a proof from that. when I'm talking to a lot of customers, I really hear a common blocker that's occurring, and that's really the studio, production team, designer, them taking a final asset and giving it to project management or the traffic controller, traffic coordinator, and waiting for them to create the proof. We've really seen this blocker get highlighted even more with the pandemic and the shift from work from home, and how inefficient the process could be, because you send it off to someone, they may not be checking their email at the moment, they may not be they may not be at their desk, and all of a sudden you're waiting hours for proof to be created when you're ready to kick off the review process right away. So having the ability to automatically have that hot folder that you were talking about and automate the proof creation process as well as the workflow assignments has really streamlined a lot of the efficiencies. So when I really look at automation with our customers, a lot of times what we really focus on is what the blockers may be and how we can address those individual blockers. So rather than trying to boil the ocean and fix everything and automate the entire process, really finding key areas where we can improve efficiency. And the biggest one, I think, is proof creation and taking that asset that's ready for review and getting it into the hands of the reviewers as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great point. Cutting down on, what I think people take for granted as kind of wait time, and just like dead air time, I think is really powerful. And considering how many projects teams are running, and as part of that survey that I alluded to at the beginning of the webinar, we found that over a third of our survey respondents 6 or more projects concurrently. And for some of you on the call, that may seem like, kindergarten, seem like a really small number. But when you start talking and thinking about just like the wait time and getting a project kicked off when an asset's just sitting in someone's inbox, that can actually really contribute at the end of the day to getting, projects delivered on time. All right, let's move on and talk about feedback loops. And one thing that I would definitely want to kind of reiterate from last month's webinar is that Agile isn't just about getting things done quickly. It's also about efficiently incorporating feedback and feedback sources. And again, you can grease the skids here significantly if you start by looking at the apps that people use every day. When it comes to the feedback loop, and I'll turn this over to Will in just a moment to share some of the experiences, but this is not only where we get the bulk of our integration requests from our customers, but also highlights the opportunity for workflow as well. And this is getting the right people involved at the right time, but also keeping the process, or maybe even its lack of process. And we're going to talk about transparency as well in just a couple of minutes. But for this example, I thought I'd use one of our more popular integration requests, which is Trello. This integration and an additional one, apart from Trello, that Will is going to show in just a little bit, is right in the Agile sweet spot, allowing you to apply both Agile and Kanban style boards to see how your creative, quote unquote. Integrating with Trello lets you create new cards and projects for new proofs, as well as like updating cards with comments, replies, et cetera, et cetera. And this is another example of real-time benefit and also a long-term benefit. The demonstration that you get, or really what you're able to demonstrate as either a project leader or a creative leader, when you're able to demonstrate this kind of command and control over your entire creative process, both within Ziflow and within the apps that the larger company uses, in the long run, that's going to help streamline approvals over time. And we've seen that happen quite a bit with our customers. And I'm going to ask Will to jump in here one more time. I know you talk about campaign planning quite a bit with customers as it relates to their workflow. Will, I think this is probably right here in that sweet spot, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from a campaigning planning perspective, where we really see integrations like this with the increased feedback loop really factor into play is it creates more visibility for the project across multiple stakeholders. So a lot of times when we look at when we look at a campaign holistically and we look at all the members that are involved in the campaign, not everyone is actually involved in the creative review and approval process. While that's a large aspect of the overall campaign itself, of course, it's the asset that you're actually going to publish, ship, print, whatever it is. There's going to be other elements of there's going to be other elements and other people involved that may not be stakeholders in the review process, but they're dependent on the asset being reviewed, or they're dependent on the asset not being bottlenecked so they can take it to the next step. And where these feedback loops really become critical, where an integration like Trello becomes extraordinarily powerful, is it gives visibility to people that may not be a part of the actual review and approval process, so they can see where the asset is. They can quickly see in this example that this proof is still being reviewed, this proof is done, this proof got sent back to design. So it creates visibility outside of just the standard workflow itself. I think that this integration itself is a really good example of where 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, 1 + 1 actually equals 3, where you take the power of Ziflow with our workflow automation and the visibility and project planning of Trello, and all of a sudden you get massive enhancements, because now an asset manager that's waiting for the asset but isn't a part of the review cycle can easily see what the current status is and where the project is. So when we talk about increased visibility due to integrations like Trello, we're not just talking about increased visibility for the proof itself or the workflow on the proof itself, but we're actually talking about increased visibility for the entire project team, because they can see where the asset is in preparation for the overall campaign.
Yeah, that's a great segue actually into the next point. You talked about visibility, Will. So let's kind of keep on that theme. Transparent visibility is another core component of Agile, and keeping progress. And I made a little bit of I mentioned this before. Keeping progress, and to be fair, sometimes it's lack of progress too, out in the open, is a key part of Agile culture. My mom likes to say that sunlight is the best disinfectant. So I think Agile definitely kind of follows that as well. And this is actually, where we're actually going to jump into a live demo of two very powerful integrations possible with Ziflow, Microsoft Teams and Jira. So I actually am going to turn it back over to Will. I'm going to stop share. I'm going to give it over to William. And all right, Will, go ahead. It's all yours.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So, Mike, since you're the only other presenter not on mute, can you just confirm that you can see my screen? Okay, maybe Mike is on mute, but I'm gonna take it as he can see my screen.
Sorry, Will, I didn't hear you. That must have been a drop in Zoom. Yeah, you're good to go.
Okay, perfect. So perfect. Let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of the key integrations that we want to highlight. I think when you say the word Agile, most people automatically jump and think of Jira. They are a big proponent of Agile development, Agile methodology, sprint planning. So I think that's a great integration for us to highlight here and show everyone in action. But overall, this Agile methodology within Ziflow can really be incorporated through any of the integrations that we talk about or any of the integrations that we have. Before we jump into the actual integration itself, I think one of the really important things for me to highlight is what powers these integrations. Within Ziflow, we have a really powerful automation engine that's called Connect, and Connect is driven by events. So these can be actions that occur. As Mike talked about earlier, you can have it monitor hot folders, you can have it automate a ton of different actions. You can even have Connect automate actions that occur within Ziflow itself. So what we can do within Connect is we can actually monitor for specific events to do things like send messages to teams or create issues or tickets within Jira. So now these integrations become extraordinarily flexible because you can determine what is the trigger or event that creates that ticket or creates that issue. So within Connect, you can have an issue automatically created in Jira when a new proof or version gets created, when a new decision gets made, when a new comment or reply gets made, when a comment gets resolved, or when a comment gets labeled. Drilling down into this deeper, you can look for this on the proof level, a stage level, or by a specific reviewer. So these triggers become extraordinarily flexible and really let you key in on any aspect that you want. The reason that this is powerful is because now it gives you granular control about when information gets sent. So when we talk about rapid iteration, you don't want things to be sent too soon because you don't want people to work on unnecessary items. So there is the other side of Agile where you may be sending information too quickly. So this allows you to control when and how information is sent itself. A really good example of this is going to be our Jira integration. As I talked about with that trigger, we can have it on new proofs, decisions, comments, comment labels, or comment resolutions. What I've typically seen with the Jira integration is we're actually going to tie it to a comment label. So not every comment requires it to be sent to Jira or an issue or a ticket to be created. So how the integration works here is the integration Jira looks for when a comment is being labeled as development. Once that comment label occurs, then it'll automatically push that. It'll automatically push that comment with the comment details into Jira directly onto the Agile board. So let's go ahead and take a look at this in action. I'm going to very quickly add a comment. Maybe we want to build some email validation into this form. Now, again, we can build any number of triggers that we want for the integration itself. Here I've made a comment, and for this specific instance, a ticket hasn't been created yet. Once someone has taken a look at this and went, okay, we do want to send this over to Jira, they can come in and apply a custom decision label. These labels are fully customizable to you, so you can build whatever your labels are. In my example, I'm going to say that this does require development effort. And now that we flag this as development, it's going to go ahead and automatically create that ticket or that issue in Jira for me. So let's go ahead and switch over to Jira. And I can see that this ticket was automatically created as a backlog item onto this board. Now the integration is going to send over relevant information about the comment onto the ticket itself. So I'll let you know who made that comment, what the comment is, with a quick link to the proof and the comment itself. A really key thing to mention here is this integration doesn't eliminate the need for grooming. So you're still going to want to make sure that you groom your tickets before you take it from backlog and put it into the development queue, for instance. But what it does do is it eliminates a lot of the time that's spent copying and pasting information from one platform to the other, because once the comments are made, once the comments are labeled, all this information can be sent directly to Jira, where we can go ahead and groom the ticket if necessary. Or if we're happy with the ticket, we can automatically get it ready for development. We can take it from development into in progress. Once it's been completed, we can move it to done. So it is pushing information directly from Ziflow into Jira for your ticket or issue creation. So really streamlining your ticket creation process and eliminating a lot of that need to copy and paste information from one platform to the other platform, having all that information sent directly and giving you the ability to groom and clean that ticket before you do select it for development or send it to in progress for development. So that's the Jira integration at a high level. The Teams integration works very similar to the Jira integration at a high level. What the Teams integration allows you to do is you can send relevant information from Ziflow directly into a specific channel for Teams. This can be to any channel that you need. So you can set up channels for each project. You can set up a generic Ziflow channel that I have here. But now we can push information in real time as it occurs within Ziflow directly into Teams. This can be information such as when the proof gets created, when new comments get made, when decisions get submitted. So now real-time information can be sent to Teams rather than relying on email notifications, rather than relying on popping your head up and yelling across the room. you can notify people in the systems that they're already using. So if you know, if your team is dependent on Teams and they're heavily using it as a communication tool, you can have information pushed in real time from Ziflow to Teams. For example, if I very quickly create a proof, so let me go ahead and just upload this brand new proof here. As this proof gets created into Ziflow, as this proof gets created within Ziflow, it's automatically going to push the notification of this. It's going to automatically push the notification of this proof directly to Teams. Now, a couple of really helpful aspects here is you're going to have control over whether you're still leveraging the email notifications within Ziflow, or if you simply want to use the Teams notification itself. So here, the email notifications are still being sent. I can see that in the progress bar, this S still lights up in green, but in real time, as this proof was created, a notification is also being sent to my designated channel in Teams. This is going to apply to any of the actions or events that I set up here. So as I add a new proof, add a new version, add a new comment, add a new decision, all this information can be pushed directly into a channel, so into the tools that people are already working with. And I think that's it for me, Mike. Those are a couple of the integrations that I want to highlight. As Mike mentioned, we have a number of different integrations. We have integrations with Trello, Asana, Teams, Slack, Jira, NetSuite, Basecamp. There's a ton of different integrations here, but I want to highlight on a couple of the popular ones that we've seen lately, such as the Jira integration and the Teams integration.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. That was great. And as I mentioned, Jira and Teams have been definitely two, I would say, of the top 3 integration requests as of late. Jira getting a lot of popularity with marketing teams and creative teams. In fact, something we talked about last month on last month's webinars, we actually used Jira here in the Ziflow marketing department to manage our kind of Agile implementation. So very cool. Well, thank you for showing us that in the live demo. Let's go ahead and slide over to the questions. We've got a few that were entered. And I'm sorry I didn't see it till now, but Nancy, we will get in touch with you to show you a few examples of what the Adobe plugin does. I think it's a really cool new plugin. I can also I'll make sure you get a blog post that we announced the plugin. One question we had, Will, which I think is you showed it actually pretty well there, and maybe this question was entered before we started showing the actual demo, but would you say that these integrations require a technical resource to make happen?
Yeah, great question. Absolutely not, actually. These integrations don't require a technical resource. Ziflow has built out these integrations. Really, what you're going to do when you set up your integrations is you're going to pick when you want the integrations to trigger or fire. So you're going to say, should a new task be created when a new proof gets created, or a new comment gets made, or a decision of changes required gets made. So really, for the integration aspect, all you're doing is you're selecting when the action should occur, when that message should be sent, when that task should be created, when that ticket should be created. But beyond that, Ziflow has developed and built all of the SDKs for this, so the integrations really are plug and play, and you're just picking the actions and the triggers that drive the integrations for new ticket creation, task creation, or message being sent.
Great. One last question, and this I think is actually specific to your Jira demo, Will. Yeah, I believe it is. I saw that the integration automatically created a ticket, but what if we wanted it to create a subtask to an existing ticket instead? Great question.
That's a really great question. It sounds like we have a couple of Jira experts on the call. You can absolutely have it create a subtask within, you can have it absolutely create a ticket or a subtask within an existing ticket. Within Ziflow, one of the unique aspects is we have a concept of custom properties. So you can actually create a custom property that allows you to define the ticket you wanted to create the subtask to. You can do this at any level within Jira, actually. If you wanted to create tickets within specific epics, if you want to create tickets in specific boards, Or if you want to create tickets or subtasks within existing tickets, all you have to do is you input the epic, board, or ticket number into that custom property, and then the integration is going to know where it should actually create that ticket or subtask for you.
Okay, great, awesome. Thanks, Will. And that actually wraps up the last of the questions. If you'd like to take a product tour of Ziflow, you can hit ziflow.com/demo, and that will get you a free trial, free 14-day trial of Ziflow. And we would love to work with you. If you have any questions about these integrations, how they might look in your particular organizations, please feel free to reach out to us. And I think at that point, I'm going to go ahead and thank everyone for attending, and have a great rest of your week. And we will be in touch about our next webinar coming up